All right, good afternoon, everyone. I see a bunch of folks joining, so thank you all so much for creating the time this afternoon to come and share in our demo of the new CMS Merit tool. We are very excited. I know last year was a bit of a struggle for so many reasons. COVID aside, even just, asking us to kind of go back in technology and submit a Word document, very different from previous years if you're used to using JIRA and everything. And so just wanted to thank you all for your patience with that. And we promised you a new amazing tool that's specifically designed for the pre-rulemaking process and for measure submission. And so with a year's worth of work and everything, that's what we've created, and that's what we're very excited to demo to you today. So my name is Kim Rawlings, and I am the core and co-task lead of this area of work, and just want to, again, really welcome you today. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A. We're really excited to show you the tool and excited to kick off the pre-rulemaking cycle. So I'm going to turn it to Meredith to go over our agenda and get started.
Thanks so much, Kim, and I'm thrilled to be here today to introduce you all to the new measure submission tool, CMS Merit. Thank you again for joining us. Again, my name is Meredith Eastman, and I am the pre-rulemaking task lead at Battelle. Before we begin, I just wanted to review a few housekeeping items. You may have seen some slides we were cycling through as folks were joining, but in case you missed them, I wanted to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded. We will be muting all lines for the presentation, but we will open up the lines for questions at the end of the presentation. Please also do feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will address them during the question and answer period. So as an overview of what I'll be presenting today, I'll start by describing what CMS Merit is and some of its defining features. Then I will share my screen and will demonstrate some of the features and functionality of this new tool. After I show off Merit, I'll review some help resources that are available to you, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. So what is CMS Merit? CMS Merit, the full name of which is Merit Measures Under Consideration Entry Review Information Tool, is the tool for measure developers to submit their clinical quality measures for consideration by CMS. It's a replacement of JIRA used in years past, and it's a replacement of last year's use of the Word template. Measures that you'd like to submit for the 2021 MUC List must come through CMS Merit. In addition to being the tool to submit information about measures, CMS Merit also facilitates searches of measures from the current and from previous years, and it structures the workflow for CMS review of measures submitted to the MUC List. In today's webinar, we'll be focusing on CMS Merit from the submitter's perspective. CMS Merit offers several features that will improve the MUC List entry and review process, including automatic completeness checks for required measure information, the ability to save partial information and return later to finish your submission, the ability to track your submission through the review process, and it does all of this with an easy-to-navigate interface. Throughout the tool, you'll see a red asterisk to denote fields that are mandatory. These fields will be used to enhance CMS's and the measure application partnership's assessment of measures. You may notice that there are more required measure information fields in CMS Merit than you've seen in previous years. These fields have been included to support CMS in addressing the U.S. Government Accountability Office recommendation regarding systematic measures assessment that aligns with CMS quality objectives. They help to standardize, streamline, and align required information for stakeholders and developers. They assist CMS in prioritizing measures for development, implementation, and continued development. And they enhance the existing endorsement and measure selection process. And with that overview, I will now open up my browser and transition to sharing my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. I am now on the Merit Login screen. So first, to get an account for CMS Merit, you must click on this Request Account button and complete the form that you'll be taken to. Although Merit is built on the same platform as the Measures Inventory Tool, or CMIT, you must specifically request access to Merit even if you already have a CMIT account. So you'll use actually the same login information for both CMIT and Merit, but again, you must specifically request access to Merit even if you already have a CMIT account. So now I'm going to just highlight a couple of things on this login page. We have a link to a quick start guide for reviewers that will help orient you to the tool. And we also have a Word version of the MUC List template. You're welcome to download that template, complete it to your satisfaction, and then use CMS Merit to populate the tool if you prefer. So I'm now going to log in, and we do use two-factor authentication. So that gets set up when you request an account, and I am using my Google Authenticator here, and I am now logged in. So because I am not logging in for the first time, I'm taken directly to my submissions. You'll see I have two measures saved over here for the purpose of this demonstration. However, when you are logging in for the first time, you'll see two large buttons sort of in the center of the screen, a button that says Submit a New Measure, and a button to download that same Word document that we saw on the login page. Again, you can download that document, refer to it as guidance, you can populate it as you wish, and then copy and paste your information into Merit if you would like to do that. And again, it's available when you first log in and on the login screen itself. So there are two ways to start a measure submission. You could click that big button that would be here the first time you log in, or you can click Submit a New Measure in the upper right-hand corner. However, rather than start a new measure right now, I'm actually going to open up a measure that I've created previously for the purposes of this demonstration. So I'm going to click on my demonstration measure 2. And this has saved information from my previous session, and I want to go back in and complete my submission. So I'm going to click Edit to pick up from where I left off. Now this page is the exact same page that you will see if you had clicked on Submit a New Measure for the very first time. However, you'll see here, because I've clicked on a Save Measure, that I have some information populated in the fields. There are a couple of features on this page that are used throughout the tool that I want to stop and point out. First, as promised, you can see those red asterisks next to each field name. Those indicate that that field is required to complete. And you'll also see a question mark next to each field name. And if you hover over the question mark, you will see some text pop up. Oops, just went away. There we go. The pop-up text provides instructions on the type of information that should be supplied for the field. So you can see each one displaying as I go through. It's good practice to review each of those hover over texts as you are working through the tool to make sure that you are answering the question according to the guidance. In addition, that Word template that we've talked about also has the exact same guidance on it. I wanted to point out these character limits here. Unless specified, the character length for the field is going to be 4,000 characters. So we have a little bit less room for the measure title, a little bit less room for the measure description, but all the other fields are 4,000 characters. And these boxes will actually expand as you enter your text, so you'll be able to see everything as you're entering it in. There are a couple of ways to navigate through this tool. We have our left navigation bar over here, and you can see the major sections of the tool. You can click to navigate between sections by just clicking on the name of the one you want to go to. However, I will caution you to be sure to click the Save button before you navigate from a page you've been working on. And I also caution you, do not use your browser's back arrow to navigate if you have not first clicked save, or you will risk losing the information you've put on that page. The other way you can navigate is by clicking on this Save and Continue button that will appear at the bottom of each page, and this will advance you to the very next page in the tool. You will see, as you page through, a pencil icon appear next to each section where you have information saved. When you've finally completed all the required information on a page, you will actually see that pencil turn into a green check mark. So here, this indicator suggests that I have some saved information on the measure information page, but it's not quite complete. However, I'm getting those green check marks on the subsequent pages in the properties section. So that's a good progress check as you move along. You'll see as you page through, there are multiple question types in Merit, including open text fields, drop-downs, checkboxes, and radio buttons. Additionally, there are some answers that will generate additional questions for you to complete. So as an example, I'm going to navigate to characteristics. I'm on general characteristics here. If I had answered yes to this question, is this measure in the CMS Measures Inventory tool, or CMIT, you can see that a subsequent question appeared asking me to provide the CMIT ID. I'm going to click back to no for the purposes of this exercise, but again, there are some questions that will open up additional questions for you to respond to. Now let's talk about attachments. So you are encouraged to provide the measure information form or other methodological documents for your measure if the MIF is not available. You have the opportunity to provide attachments on this attachments page. You can either drag and drop the file, or you can browse to find the file on your computer. I am actually going to drag and drop a file over right now. You can all see that. So after I've dragged and dropped, you can see it appears under current attachments, and I have the ability to either change or delete that attachment. And I can also make any comments. For example, if I were providing methodological documents, I might want to describe the contents of those documents in the comments section. Now let's say I've gone through each page. I provided all the required information, and I think I'm ready to submit. I will navigate to the Review and Submit page and have CMS Merit check to verify that I have actually submitted all the required information. So I'm going to press this button to check submission for errors. Oh, and it looks like I missed a field back on the first page. I can go back and complete this information in a couple of different ways. I can click here on the left navigation bar where this alarming red triangle is, or I can simply click on this red hyperlink text. I should be taken to exactly where I need to go to complete that information. So here I am on this page, and I can see right here, I did not describe the peer-reviewed evidence justifying this measure. So I will put my placeholder text in there, and I will press save. So having supplied that information, and I checked using the automatic check feature, I'm going to see if I can submit. There we go. There, check's complete, and no errors have been found. So now I have to go ahead and hit the Submit Measure button. Great. I get a thank you, and I actually will receive an email notifying me that the measure has been submitted. So what happens after submission? I'm going to navigate back to my submission page, and I'm going to check not the measure I was just working on, but a measure I submitted earlier, Demonstration Measure 1. I'm going to click on it to highlight it, and you can see on this page there is this nice submission summary. There's a status summary here that lists all of the programs that I submitted this measure to. In this example, I submitted a very widely applicable measure to a number of programs, and there's a status for each program listed separately. Each measure undergoes a first and second level measure manager review, then a CMS review, and then a final accept reject decision is made for the MUC list. You can actually expand this little workflow even further by clicking on any one of these circles. And this pop-up shows the detail of the entire workflow. And as my measure progresses through the process, this dot will move forward showing progress. I'm going to click out of that. So what happens if I want to make a change to the information I submitted? I may want to make a change because a reviewer has gotten in touch with me and asked that I make a change, or I may want to make a change because I noticed an error in my submission prior to the submission deadline of May 27th. If a reviewer does request that I make a change, I will receive an email indicating that there is a comment for me to review. When I receive that email, I can log in, come to this submissions page, the submission summary page, scroll down, and we can see here under activity that there is a comment from the measures manager. The measures manager happens to be me, so that is my name in addition to sort of the Eastman demo account that we're working with. Just in case that's confusing, this would not come from the submitter, it would come from the measures manager. And I can see that the comment was, please provide a more descriptive title. Okay, so how can I make that change? I go up to the top of the page and click Request Change. And you'll see now that I've opened up my submission and there's actually a change request option next to every single field. I go to the field that I'm interested in changing. In this case, it is the title. And you'll see that two fields have popped up, one for the new value and one in which I provide the reason for the change. So in the new value field, I will type improved demonstration measure 1. The reason for the change, I will put measure manager request for more descriptive title. Then I'm going to press Submit Change Request on the right here. So this change is going to be submitted, and the individual that requested the change is going to get an email flagging that this comment is there for them, or this change is there for them to approve or reject. Let me cancel out. So now I want to go back to my submission, and I can also close the loop on that change request by replying to the comment. I will just indicate change has been made, and I can add that comment here. And I would select the program lead that requested the comment, and you can get that information right here on the summary page. So when the status of your measure changes, in other words, as it passes from reviewer to reviewer, you will receive an email notification. And you can always log back in to this page under My Submissions, check the submission summary, and see the activity that's logged for your measure. And again, this indicator will also change as the measure moves through the process, as will this detailed workflow. So there are a couple of other things you can do from the My Submissions page. Let's say I wanted to take a look at what I submitted. I can click this View Full button, and here is the information I submitted. You could page through it and see exactly what you submitted. And I'm going to go back to my submissions, and there's also an export button. And pressing this button will create an Excel file with each column representing a different measure information field. You can download and save that export, and it will export every single measure that's in your My Submissions list. Before we end the demonstration portion, I wanted to share another convenient feature of CMS Merit, and that is the possibility of adding a co-submitter. In other words, multiple individuals can work on a measure submission. To request that a colleague be granted rights to edit your measure, navigate to About and then Contact Us at the top of the page. In the Contact Us page in this form, under Message, Provide the co-submitter's merit username and the title of the measure to which they should have submission rights. It's important here to note that the co-submitter must already have a merit account in order to be granted shared submission rights to your measure. It's also important to note that you will not receive a notification if your co-submitter is simultaneously working on your measure in CMS Merit. So I encourage you to coordinate with your co-submitter colleagues to ensure that you are not accidentally overriding one another's changes. So I will now head back to the slide presentation to describe how you can get help if you need it as you are working on your measure. So as I mentioned, the Quick Start Guide is downloadable from the Merit Login page, and that's a handy resource that is available to you and will cover the topics we reviewed in today's demonstration. Additionally, we encourage you to contact the Measures Management System Support Team at mmssupport@battelle.org for questions about MUC List requirements as well as any technical issues you encounter with CMS Merit. And lastly, although it's not on this slide, I encourage you to visit the CMS Pre-Rulemaking website for information about this year's pre-rulemaking cycle. And with that, I think we can go ahead and open up for questions.
And Meredith, this is Kate. We did have a question in the chat box asking if you could attach more than one attachment in each of the different sections for your measure submission.
Great question. You can attach multiple attachments, not on different pages, but within that attachment page, you have the ability to add multiple attachments. And in fact, if you are submitting to the MIPS program, you will be required to submit the MIPS peer-reviewed journal template. So you would have that attachment as well as the measure information form on that page. Any other questions at this time?
There was one more question to provide. Oh, yes, we have two more questions. One of which was to provide CMS website URL. And so I don't know if that's on one of the slides.
Here, I'm backing up to the slide. It's right here on this slide, cmsmerit.cms.gov.
We have a couple other questions coming in. Another one is, should developers plan to complete submissions in advance of the May 27th deadline to allow for time for reviewers to request any necessary changes?
So that's a great question. Developers should indeed plan to complete their submissions by May 27th. Through May 27th, you can make changes on your own without having to go through that approval process that I demonstrated. So you want to make sure that you are comfortable with what you submitted by the 27th. Hopefully that makes sense. And then the formal review process will occur after that date.
We have a couple other questions coming in. If you choose to populate the Word document, does it get uploaded into Merit?
No, that's a good question. The Word document is for your reference only. We do not, we won't be accepting those Word templates for formal submissions. You must use the Merit tool to submit your measure for the 2021 MUC List. So that Word document is really for your reference to help you, make sure that you gather all the information you need before you go into the Merit tool and start populating it for your submission.
Our next question is to please confirm to add co-submitters, just type in their names and measure name into the message box in the About tab.
That is correct. Person you're adding as a co-submitter must also already have a CMS Merit account. So the first step would be to make sure that your co-submitter has an account, and if not, they should go ahead and request one through the process we described at the beginning. And then once they have their account, then you just contact us, put their username, their Merit username, and the measure name in the message box on the Contact Us form and the About page.
And then another question we have is, as far as the approval process goes, do we need also to ensure that division leadership have accounts to approve, disapprove of measures?
Yes. So this webinar has been focused on the submitter experience. So this is primarily geared towards measure developers and those who will be submitting their measures for the 2021 MUC List. We'll have a separate webinar from the reviewer's perspective, and reviewers will need to get accounts set up in advance of the review period in order to execute reviews.
Next question is, can you save drafts of your information as you complete it, or do you have to enter/upload everything at once and then submit?
Great question. So there are multiple ways to save and then return. Let me quickly see if I can go back to my submission, and I'll share my screen again in a moment. I'm going to submit a new measure for this. Okay, let me share my screen. I'm going back to Chrome. Okay, so here's a new page where I have decided to submit a new measure. It's completely blank. As I enter my information, going along here, you can save by pressing this save button up here in the upper right, or you can save and go to the next page by clicking save and continue. If you have pressed either of those two buttons, you are free to log off and log back in at a later time, and your information will be saved. I will stop sharing.
Our next question is, will Battelle offer technical assistance reviews of measures submitted?
So we have a two-step review process that starts after the window closes on the 27th. We review to ensure internal consistency of measures, for completion of information, things like that. And we will get in touch with you prior to the CMS review if there's anything that needs to be changed. And if you have any questions as you are, submitting your measure, the hover over text isn't clear, you need additional guidance on the type of information to put into the field, you can absolutely reach out for guidance on that type of question as well.
And then I just wanted to check with Kim Rawlings at CMS if you had anything else to add to that question. The question was, will Battelle offer technical assistance reviews?
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to what Meredith was saying, of course, Battelle and us at CMS will help with any technical issues that you're having around the submission and around using the tool itself. And if you have any questions around the template and how to fill that out, we will, of course, answer any of those questions. We also do have MMS support at battelle.org available for general questions. So if you are, like reading through the blueprint and looking at those best practices and guidance and requirements, et cetera, around general measure development, we're always happy to get questions about how to interpret the blueprint. However, we do not help analyze any testing data or anything like that. And as Meredith shared, Battelle does a preliminary kind of Q&A review before it comes to CMS, just to make sure that nothing egregious is kind of, maybe accidentally missed. I mean, I think with the system that we have going here, you'll be prompted yourself if something is required that's missing, but that's usually about where we draw the line with that sort of review. And of course, if the program leads get the measure and have further questions or need further communication, then as Meredith showed in the demo, there is a process for that inside of the tool for us to ask questions and program leads to ask questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. We have another question, which is, are developers encouraged to complete the non-required fields? For example, evidence that measures can be operationalized.
I would say that any information that you can provide that would help the evaluation of your measure is good to provide if you have it. So, if you're able to provide that additional information, I would encourage you to do so.
And it looks like at this moment we don't have any other questions in the Q&A box.
I happen to see one about printing a PDF of the full submission. We do not have that opportunity to print a PDF of the submission. You can export a Excel file, and the information is saved in there for you to page through at any time, but we do not have the functionality at this time to print a PDF format.
Thank you. And we are going to be unmuting the line to allow people to ask additional questions. Highly, highly encouraged. Please mute your line if you are not speaking, but we are going to be unmuting soon.
And the Q&A is also still available if you prefer to enter your question that way.
And we are getting a lot of feedback, so I would ask everyone to make sure that they are muted if they are not speaking. Meredith, we have another question in the chat box, which is, when referring to developers, are you referring to CMS as the measure steward or contractors as the developers? Will contractors have access to the system?
So developers can be contractors. So anyone actually can request a merit account. I expect that there will be, MIDS contractors and others, specialty societies that will be interested in using this tool to submit measures. Any other questions? I think we'll make this a last call.
I don't think it was asked. I think there was a follow-up question about technical assistance on the content of what we are submitting. So if I'm interpreting your question correctly, and please do feel free to give an example if you have one. But Battelle does not review the content to make sure that it makes sense or make sure it reaches a certain standard. That's something that happens when the measure submission is reviewed by program leads at CMS. If you have a specific question about what is meant by a particular data field or what is typically submitted, we could provide that, provide that guidance. I will also say that MUC, the MUC list itself is publicly available as well. I know some of the, previously, you might be able to look at other previous and past MUC submissions as well to kind of get an idea of what the precedence is there. But we do not review, or Battelle does not review kind of content of what's in the field to provide technical assistance or to do any sort of pre-review. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to either try and speak up or clarify.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, and it looks like that question, your response did address the question, so thank you again. Okay. Well, with that, I did just want to remind you all that this sub-webinar was recorded, and we'll be posting it, and we'll send out links to where you can find the recording. And I, again, thank you for your time and your interest in CMS Merit.